Hello everyone, welcome to the Rural Press Club of Queensland. My name's Stacey Wordsworth and I'm president of the club. I do begin today by acknowledging the traditional custodians of the land on which we meet today and pay my respects to their elders past and present. Again, welcome, and sorry we haven't seen you for what feels like quite some time now. As you will be aware, COVID-19 forced us to can a few of our most recent events, which was really unfortunate, but it's great to be back here at Tattersalls. It's great to have so many of you in the room. There's a great feel, and we're kind of on the downhill run for the year, so it's good that we could all get together, and hopefully we will again a couple more times before Christmas. We're also here today because it is a day designed to recognise the valuable contribution of females to the agriculture industry. It's a global movement, International Day of Rural Women. So given it is the day that it is, we are delighted today to present a woman who, given her career has spanned being a primary producer, a meat retailer, a political advisor, and now Senator for Queensland, has clearly dedicated much of her life to advocating on behalf of rural and regional Australia. Recently, she has also helped to lead the national discussion on food labelling laws and what terms such as plant-based chicken, beef and pork really mean for the nation's red meat sector. Senator Susan McDonald, our warmest welcome to you. We look forward to hearing about your work leading the Senate inquiry into red meat category branding and also about your career as a rural woman. So thank you so much for joining us today. And I should make note that Susan is also a former treasurer of the Rural Press Club, so it's just terrific to have her in many ways. Welcome today also to the Honourable Larry Anthony. Welcome to Director General of the Department of Agriculture, Fisheries and Forestry, Bob G. Former DG Dr Beth Woods, I think, is here as well. And it's really terrific to see a big roll-up of journalists today, including two of our Rural Journalism Hall of Famers, Pip Courtney and John Condon. AGFL's President Georgie Somerset is here, as is Managing Director of Meat and Livestock Australia, Jason Strong. I could go through a huge list, but let's just say there are many industry leaders and stakeholders in the room for what I think will be a very important discussion today. Since we've last seen you, the Rural Press Club has held its AGM and there have been a couple of small changes. Fran Becker, who was our committee member, is now Vice President. Our former Vice President, Mark Neville, has stepped back to a committee position after doing his 3 years. And we also welcome our brand new Treasurer and veteran Westpac banker, John Burke, into his new role. John, he's here today. He's got an official job a little bit later and we're delighted to have him on board. So thanks, John. John has, this does mean someone, I guess, has gone from the committee, and John has replaced our former Treasurer, Rolly Wilson, who at our AGM stood down after his 3-year term, which sounds a bit like jail, but I can assure you it's a lovely experience being on the committee. And look, I want to sincerely thank Rolly, who I think particularly over the last couple of years, where it's been really difficult knowing what we're doing, how many events we can hold and what our revenue is going to be as a club, has been outstanding in terms of doing spreadsheets and forecasts and working up various scenarios so that we've known exactly where we're standing, and he's been an enormous help and support to the committee. So thank you, Rolly. I know you will continue to be a dear friend of the club. So this means that our 2021-22 committee is Fran Becker as Vice President, Will Banks as Secretary, John Burke as Treasurer, and committee members James Nason, Mark Phelps, Carolyn Martin, Michael Blakeney, Wendy Brownscombe and Mark Neville. Not everyone's here today, but if you do see a committee member and would like to give them some feedback or a suggestion, please feel free. To an important presentation now, and again, this is something that should have happened a few months ago, but given COVID, things have been a bit topsy-turvy, and that is our Rural Press Club student scholarship. So each year, the club awards a $5,000 scholarship to an exceptional journalism student in their final year of study, and this is something that we're really proud to do and committed to doing, given that we are a press club, and we see one of the most important things we do is promoting rural and regional journalism, particularly when you see things like the Longreach Leader shutting up shop after 97 or 98 years, I think it was, and some of those regional papers really struggling. Today, I'm very happy to announce that this year's winner is final year University of Queensland student Alice Marshall. Alice grew up on a sheep and dryland cropping property in northwest New South Wales, a childhood that was heavily influenced heavily influenced her desire to tell stories and to tell stories about farming and agriculture in rural communities. Today she's officially a Queenslander and is completing a dual degree in journalism at Arts at the University of Queensland, as I said, and I won't give an exact number, but let me tell you her GPA is excellent. Alice's portfolio of work that she submitted to the club as part of her application covered topics including sustainability in irrigation, COVID-19 and its impact on agriculture, the national healthcare divide and how agriculture sits alongside the gas industry. And Alice's articles really did show a keen interest in the issues that are important to rural and regional Queensland. Her writing shows a maturity not often seen at this point, and we as a club are simply delighted to present Alice with this annual award, and we're very excited to follow what I'm sure will be a very successful career in journalism. So Alice, we've just got a small certificate here. Congratulations again, Alice. Look, as always, we must sincerely thank our home paddock sponsors, McCullough Robertson Lawyers, Collier's Agribusiness and Sunsuper for their ongoing support of our club and of agriculture in Queensland. We honestly couldn't do what we do without the support of these marvellous organisations. A quick reminder, if you are a social media type and tweeting today, we're using the hashtag RPC Meat Labelling. But for now, enjoy your lunch and we'll be back shortly. Thank you.
It's my great pleasure to introduce our speaker today. So I think Susan McDonald is very well known to this audience and certainly to our club, and a great welcome to you, Susan. Susan's been a senator for just over 2 years, elected in 2019 for the Liberal National Party, and sits on the National Party benches. And very much she's a true champion of rural Queensland. She's a special envoy for Northern Australia, but I think we'd all agree that her influence is statewide. And of course, Susan's part of the McDonald family, a very big cattle operation centred on Cloncurry, and I know Susan's very, very proud of that fact, as she should be. In fact, the first job was in stock camps. I'm sure there were jobs before that. She also worked at Expo 88, which was a great exposure to Queensland, and studied on School of the Air, went to Stewart Home, graduated from the University of Queensland, worked as an accountant, worked for the former Minister for Natural Resources and Mines, Andrew Cripps, as the Chief of Staff, and then ventured into the wonderful world of meat retailing through the Super Butcher chain, which fitted very well into the family business, and I think Susan proved a real champion at retailing meat. So today, we all know, is International Day of Rural Women. But people might not be aware, unless they're reading their UN calendars, that tomorrow is the International Day of Food, which fits in very well. And on Sunday is the International Day of the Eradication of Poverty, which is the trilogy, because so many rural women across the world bear the brunt of poverty. So there's a good connection there. But if we could welcome Susan, very interested to hear about meat labelling.
Thank you. I cannot tell you how excited I am to be here today amongst so many friends and colleagues. It is just great to catch up with so many people. I need to acknowledge Stacey Wordsworth and the amazing job she's done to keep the Rural Press Club going, keep us all connected and mean that we can still catch up on issues that are so important to us. And how great is it to all be together? There are a lot of states in the country that still look at Queensland and would be envying us for today. I want to acknowledge the members of the committee, and I know that the accounts will be in good hands with John Burke. I took over from another Westpac banker, Rod Kelly, when I took over as Treasurer, so thank you for the contributions that you're making. The other members of the committee, but I really want to acknowledge all of the regional journalists who are in the room today. You are fighting an enormous battle to tell the stories of regional and rural Australia, and what could be more important than that? And today I think you'll find that is a case in point. So with the closure of rural newspapers, rural radio, rural TV, I just want to acknowledge that we should be very grateful for those people who choose to stay in regional journalism and tell our stories. So thank you to those people. And it is International Rural Women's Day today. This time last year, Georgie Somerset and I were together at Emerald for a terrific lunch put on by Alicia Parker in a woolshed. It was a terrific day, and so Georgie and I have committed to spending every International Rural Women's Day together, because that's the way it should be. But today, I want to talk to you about the Meat Definitions Inquiry. Because it was in 2015, I had the great privilege to speak at the Rural Press Club Ekka Breakfast. And at that time, I talked about there'd never been a good idea thought up over a salad. And 6 years later, here I am to report to you that I think that still stands. And the reason why I know that is that in 2016, the Australian Food Standards, or Food Standards Australia and New Zealand, FOSANZ, approved a request from Sanitarium to allow that the word milk could be used on non-dairy milk substitutes. And it created this loophole that we're going to talk about today. So we have heard from a number of beef producers, meat producers right across Australia. We've heard from industry panels and peak bodies, and the next phase of the meat inquiry is that we're going to hear from nutritionists, food production technologists, as well as hear from other jurisdictions about what's happening in other parts of the world. So this inquiry is very wide-ranging and has had a huge number of submissions. So I really have to thank those people in industry who have really done the hard work, which is put forward submissions and content to allow the senators who are part of this inquiry to really get stuck in. It all seems very strange because we have, at the same time, a very clear definition for the export of meat. There is no grey area. Meat is the product of a carcass of an animal, and yet domestically we've got into this strange place. I want to read a quote to you that came from Agforce CEO Mike Gurin, and I think it sums it up perfectly. Imagine walking into a store that sells electronics to purchase an iPad, but when you get home and open the box, you find yourself staring at an Android phone, not even a tablet. You look at the box again. It clearly says iPad on the front. There's a picture of an iPad on the box as well. Then you notice the writing. It's small, way down the bottom, in a different font. Our latest Android phone, the only device you'll ever need. Is this fraudulent? Are you at fault because you didn't read the box properly? Should companies be able to market their products however they like? Or should what's on the packaging, words and images, actually represent what's inside? Now, if you ask a reasonable person, what would you say to that? That does not seem a reasonable example, and yet that is exactly the discussion we're having. So I started to hear from both consumers and industry in the last few years. Consumers who had been at a shopping centre, bought a product that they thought was a meat product, got it home, cooked it, thought this isn't what I was expecting, checked the box and realised they'd bought that in error. Some of them didn't know you could report it to the ACCC. Some of them didn't want to take it back to the shop. It was not a wildly expensive product. And they certainly weren't going to write to the ACCC even if they realised that that was an avenue, because it just wasn't that big a cost in their lives. But that is the situation that was happening. And of course, industry started to become alert to some of the secondary challenges, and I'll come to that shortly. But one of the things that I learnt running butcher shops is that customers shop with their eyes. And when I did marketing many years ago, as part of my commerce degree, we were given this terrific example of the launch of Rosella tomato sauce in South America. Now, I think you'll all be able to picture the packaging. We're all fans of Rosella tomato sauce. The picture of the parrot on the front, the lovely red contents, and the non-English speaking customers stayed away from it in droves, because who wants to buy parrot blood? And this is exactly the situation that we're in now, because food choice should be easy. Natural meat, processed substitute, whatever you choose to eat is fine by me. And often when I'm doing media, journalists like to say, but aren't you having a go at Australian farmers who are growing grains and horticulture and pulses? And of course, nothing could be further from the truth. And it's been so great that the peak industry bodies for all of those growers have also been up and supported this inquiry, because people want clarity in their decision making. The reason why this has come to this point is that we are having products. There's around 270 plant-based proteins on the market currently, meat products on the market. Some of them are using the picture of an animal. They're using the name of the animal. And then in smaller words, they are... Oh, and look, I've got a video here. Let me go to that. Thank you. Because we've got some examples on the screen. People make decisions based on the cues that they see, based on where it is in the supermarket, and based on what they see on the boxes. English is not everybody's first language in Australia. You might be dyslexic. You might be a new immigrant. You may have never learned to read at school, but you have enough English that you can recognise words like beef, like chicken, like pork. Or you might just be like those many of us have been in this, of having a couple of kids hanging onto your shirt as you're going around, and you are not expecting to have to read the labels on every product you buy. Because in Australia, we are incredibly fortunate to have such a high standard of food production. And I know that consumers expect clarity in these products, in what they're buying, because they've told us. We have country of origin labelling. We have very clear ingredients labels. We are very used to being able to identify simply if something is gluten-free, organic, halal. All of these things are very important issues that Australians want to be able to identify simply. And as a mother wanting to feed my children, I'm sure that you will all have the same experience. Whilst my own food choices may not always be 100%, when I'm shopping to feed my children and my family, I want to know the journey from the paddock to the plate. I want to understand all of those elements that are important to me, but most importantly, I want to know what is in the food that I'm giving them. That is a very simple nutritional and ingredient label that I'm putting on their plate. And one of the examples that you'll see on the screen is the comparison between the pork product and the plant-based roast pork product. We live in a world where people are trying to eat well, eat whole foods. And so this transparency in packaging is critical. It is critical because it can have dietary implications, but most importantly, it's just so that people don't feel deceived. It is also a time when we are living with changing food recommendations. It's not that long ago that we were told eggs were bad for you, dairy was bad for you, red meat was bad for you, red wine was bad for you. And now so many of those recommendations have changed. And so it's important that we support consumers and the decisions that they're trying to make. The other side of this coin is, the other side of the consumer coin is the industry coin. Now, RMAC has identified that over generations, Australian graziers have spent about $7 billion in levies and matching research money from the government. And that money has been spent on a range of topics, whether it be sustainability claims, pasture production, pasture improvements, animal welfare, eating quality, marketing to export places. All of this has been an important investment, and it is the intellectual property of the meat industry. And it is something that we should not be ashamed about protecting, because this is a terrific industry, and it is an industry that operates in a part of the country that I love and want to see thrive. Because some of the claims that are made on alternate protein packaging and that are made, and I'll come to some other examples later, is that in some way meat production is either environmentally unsustainable or that it operates on land that could be used for an alternate use. Now, for those of you who haven't been to Cloncurry, which is the centre of the universe, you would know that we are not going to convert to broad-scale cropping in that part of the world. Rangelands raising for beef cattle is the perfect use for this land. We can be very proud of the job we do. But we grow different types of meat. So whether it is the premium eye fillet or the branded pork or the seafood, any of these products that we grow around Australia, they cannot be easily substituted by something else. And I touched on the importance of regional journalism at the beginning, and this is why. Because we have allowed a narrative to grow up that alternate proteins are easily substitutable for the products that are grown in Australia, the meat products that are grown in Australia. And that they are easily substitutable on a nutritional basis, but also that they are in some way preferable on an environmental basis. Now, we know this is not true, and yet this is now something that falls glibly from the lips of marketers and decision makers in businesses around the world. And that is what we have to turn our attention to. Volvo has decided to remove leather from their cars because of the impact on sustainability. It's not right. But if a lie and a mistruth is told often enough, it does become a reality. So they have made that decision. There is a new meat product that has been launched. It's called Meat, M-E-E-T. It's a new range of plant-based beef strips. Can't be both, but anyway. And both HelloFresh and Coles have picked this product up because it is the closest meat-free option to animal meat available in Australia today. Now, my daughter is at university, she's cooking for herself, she often gets HelloFresh. I said, how would you feel if instead of beef strips, you got plant-based strips? She said, well, I feel misled. That's not what I wanted. And this is the real part of the problem that we need to understand, because apart from those premium products, the eye fillets and the porterhouse and the premium porks and Tassel seafood or whoever, a lot of our products go into grinding beef, into products that go into food services and restaurants, and we may not ever be told exactly what that is. And that carcass balancing is a critical part of our industry, of profitability. And profitability is, of course, what makes sustainable businesses, good businesses, businesses that are able to invest in their future. So when you go to a restaurant, industry leader who I was talking to said that he went to a restaurant, he had a terrific meal. It was with a board, well-known board. At the end of the meal, the restaurant staff said, "How was that?" And they said, "It was terrific, thanks very much." "How was the beef lasagna?" "Amazing." "How was the spaghetti bolognese?" "Just incredible." None of it was made with meat products. It was all with plant-based products. So those consumers were not given a choice about what they bought. And for that person, as a beef grower, as a grinding meat grower, that's also our market share and our industry are being challenged. But again, I would go back to this inquiry is not about attacking plant-based protein. If you want to have soy over a sirloin or tofu over a T-bone, good luck to you. Fantastic. I applaud it, and I certainly applaud it if it's grown by an Australian farmer. But what I don't think is okay is consumers being misled. And it is strange because in other parts of our Australian society we have such strict rules on what people can and can't say. The Property Institute, the Property Occupations Code, even if there is no detriment to the consumer, they can be severely punished for getting a description of a property wrong. I've touched on country of origin. But this sort of packaging, plant-based, animal pictures and animal names on products does not pass the pub test. Now I have to tell you that not all of this inquiry has been hard work. There have been some fabulous parts of it. People have emailed me and been on Facebook and they've made some really interesting suggestions of what I could be doing with my life and future and my general intelligence and a few other things. But one did contact me and say, did I understand there was no dog in hot dog and no baby in baby oil? So I just wanted to let everybody know that in case anybody else had that confusion. But this is an important debate to have, and it's important that we can have it as a civil debate, that we can have a discussion that is not fuelled by activists and it's not fuelled by big manufacturing companies who we do need to understand that some of them started their lives as anti-animal production activists. So I'm not afraid to call it out. I'm not afraid to defend our industry and the work we're doing. And the final part that I would tell you is just report on the Pollinate survey that recently surveyed 1,000 Australian consumers in July for its attitudes to plant-based meat. 61% of those surveyed mistook at least one plant-based meat product as containing animal meat. And additionally, half found packaging for the products tested in the survey to be confusing, citing animal imagery, small or hard-to-read font for plant-based references, and use of meat descriptors as the major cause of this confusion. And another source of confusion was where in the supermarket plant-based products were positioned. Almost half of respondents had a hard time figuring out whether a product was made from plant-based versus animal meat when looking at products in store. So I think I just want to clarify, this is an inquiry about clarity of definition, of transparency of the food we buy and the products we buy. This is important for consumers for a whole range of reasons, whether it be health, whether it be just not wanting to be misled into the decisions they're making. But it is terrifically important for our industry. So I would hope that where we get to at the end of this inquiry, as I said, we still have to hear from nutritionists, from food production businesses, and I'm interested in hearing what is happening in other jurisdictions. And I hope that we will have done the hard work, we will have done the heavy lifting to have provided the FOSANS committee, which is every state in New Zealand, the work to provide them with the ability to make the decision to correct and clarify the 2016 decision, because we can be incredibly proud of the food we grow, whether it be meat, whether it be grains, pulses, horticulture. Australian farmers operate to an incredibly high standard. but we just need a level playing field where our consumers can know what they're eating, we can protect our industry, and both lots of products can coexist. Thank you for your time.
So we've got a decent amount of time for questions this afternoon, and I'm sure there are many. So if you do have a question, pop your hand up. Rachel will find you with the microphone. There, she's over there, and fire away. If you could just say your name and perhaps where you're from to start with.
If you don't ask it now, you can't ask me later.
Oh, Susan, you're on Murdoch from the Independent. Where does ACCC fit in this? I would have thought clearly it's false and misleading, or alternatively the advertising standards people.
Yeah, so it's an excellent question. The ACCC did put in a submission to the inquiry, and they said that they had had no complaints about misleading conduct or confusion from consumers. I'm now confused because I heard evidence from a number of peak bodies and from businesses who said that they had copies of complaints. So I hope it's just poor record keeping, but when Mick Keogh comes to give evidence before the inquiry, we'll certainly be clarifying why he thinks there are no complaints and yet I have copies of complaints that have been provided to them.
Lovely to hear you speak. Thank you so much. Thank you very much. I'm a guest of SAS, but I'm a lowly real estate agent from the inner western suburbs of Brisbane who knows nothing about rural life. So I thought I'd ask on the International Day of Rural Women what more we can be doing to support women, mothers, daughters who may be doing it tough, or what we can do, because often the spotlight is put on inner city issues or South East Queensland, and what can be done to share that spotlight with people who need it in the bush.
What a terrific question, and I would have to shout out today to AgriFutures and their Rural Women of the Year programs. Alicia Parker, who I mentioned before, is the Queensland finalist for this year's competition. But I do think it's as simple as ensuring that we have great diversity on all of our boards and businesses. I mean, I use the example, despite being a terrible team sport player, that we don't want all backs in a football team, we don't want all goal shooters in a netball team, and it's the same in business and industry business and industry groups, and so involving a broad range of people is really important. I think that women are in a very good spot regionally right now. Prices are good. Looks like we're going to have a reasonable season, and so that's supporting the idea that people can stay in the regions and expand their businesses and raise their families there. As far as in the cities, what can you be doing? Reach out. I'm sure the groups that you're a part of could have relationships with regions, community groups out there, and it would be great to exchange ideas and visits. Certainly go on holiday, but when you do, make sure you clean your room at the end because there's not enough staff to help the motels out. So. Well, that's up.
Thanks, Senator. Lovely to hear from you. I'd like to reflect that maybe what we're dealing with. Alice Greenup, beef producer and Director of Cattle Council of Australia. Thank you, David Foote. I would like to reflect that maybe what we're dealing with in food labelling is a symptom of something that's been caused, by groups that have been much more active over the previous decade, maybe 2 decades, and we're sort of playing catch up. And our marketing and the work that we're doing is very reactionary. I was wondering if you could speak to what you feel we could be doing on a proactive basis to get in front of the curve instead of playing catch up behind the curve. Thank you.
So my observation is that Australians are very practical, and the reason why this is an issue is not because this is the plant-based protein space is threatening the meat industry. It's not because people are rushing out and changing their diets. so substantially, I think people are just really offended by being misled. That is the consumer part. But on our side, the fact that there is a discussion where people think that not buying animal-based protein, not using leather, and that any of those associated animal products are in any way not sustainable and not good for the environment and not done to the world's best standards, that is the story that we need to stop. And we will hear a lot more about that over the next 6 months. So we're talking about emissions, targets, and the agricultural industry has the most extraordinary stories to tell, whether it be in the work that people are doing in pasture, in genetic changes. I spoke to an abattoir who's going from a 64-tonne emitter to being a 16-tonne sequester. I mean, industry is doing so much work that we can be proud of. I really feel quite distressed when I read comments about the meat industry being one of the greatest emitters and a great polluter, because it's just not true. We are doing the work, we are leading the world, and that is the story that I think we urgently need to tell, because otherwise there will be consequences for regional industries and regional people. We will bear a burden that would be unreasonable when in fact it is industry that is leading the way.
Susan.
That's touched a nerve.
You've almost answered it before. I've asked it. David Foote. And International Women's Day, I'll have to be gracious. So, while it's not your gunfight, and I guess under the shadow of two federal National Party chairs in the room, the National Party is coming out with a very strong picture on those industries or those people that make statements about targets, about how we're going to be. And admit our beef industry's made a statement and it's set a target. I mean, you've just spoken about it. I mean, the story therefore is how we're going to overcome the story from the national side of politics that the targets aren't rigid, can't be rigid, because the bush is going to be the most impacted.
Yeah, so I think that this is a discussion that's happening. Cabinet has only just started talking about what the roadmap looks like. And I think that's the important thing to understand, is that in order to have this discussion in a full and meaningful way, we have to know what we're talking about. A target is fine and all good, but like the meat industry's target, David, we had to have a plan how to get there. And then you understand what the costs are, what the benefits are, and then people can make decisions. I think the important thing to remember is that targets set 25 years or more into the future are also not targets we have to meet tomorrow. So the work that I'm seeing, particularly in industry, to mining as well, and agricultural supply chains like the trains, like the trucking industry, is truly amazing. I think that industry, somebody in the room said this to me earlier, is what we're looking at actually, putting a framework around what industry is doing already. Because I've seen great work from Bill Burrows, I've seen great work from other scientists that I think our calculations is what we need to get right. We've allowed some assumptions around meat production being bad, around that we're not doing enough regionally, that droughts and flooding rains. There is good science that will underpin a very strong message and a strong story from Australia. That's a part that I'm really interested in. So as the party rooms meet and work towards this, I think it's important that I go away with a good understanding of what your businesses are doing, what your families are doing, because that's my job as representing you. I can have all the opinions I like in the world, but that's not the important part. It's understanding where your businesses and your families are going, because that's really what's leading us and driving us. And again, just back to Alice's point, I don't think we've told a good enough story. I think we've allowed this very negative assumption about, why agriculture should be carved out. I don't know that agriculture does need to be carved out. I think we need to find better ways to measure the work that's happening and how we can find ways to benefit from that, both financially and in our overseas markets. Georgie Somerset's got a question.
So does Mark Phelps from Queensland Country. Susan, thank you for creating this. I was interested though, if reasonable people seem to all agree that truth in labelling is so important, why can't laws be passed to make it such? Are there unreasonable people in Canberra?
Well, you know that they say there are two things in life you don't want to see made: sausages and legislation. And I'm very sorry to tell you that that is very true. So in order to the decision was made in 2016. We weren't a part of that. The meat industry wasn't a part of that, kind of slipped through. So now we do have to go back and do the heavy lifting, make sure that we've got a good range of evidence that we are hearing from every player. And so that's why I've been very keen to hear also from plant food manufacturers. We've got to understand what everybody's view is so that we can go back and we can put that through. But remembering that FSANZ is represented by every state and by New Zealand, and so we have to get broad agreement across all of those. But my sense is, as we're going along, that a reasonable person would think that this has been an unintended consequence. I mean, the second part that we need to consider is meat that's been grown in a laboratory. We're seeing examples of that in Japan, where they're growing Wagyu and then printing it with a 3D printer and then able to slice the meat to not only look like meat, but to look like Wagyu. So, again, industry needs to be protected. Industry needs to have a clear view on what is the definitions around that. Now, we haven't even got into that element. That's kind of stretching my mind, because it has come from the cells of an animal, but not a carcass. So we need to think about that as well.
Senator, thankfully you're a very sensible person, so I'm looking forward to the reasonableness of the findings. You sort of answered it, but I guess I look at 6 months ago, the conversation was all about labelling. This week it's about COP26. But the enduring conversation for me is how we tell our story, which is what you just alluded to in answering David's question. How can we as industry, you get to see a lot of industries now. I mean, that's one of the things that you're privileged as a senator is to look across all sorts of industries, although we know that your heart lies with us in agriculture, particularly in beef. But what can we learn from other industries, and what do you see that we could improve to support you in the work you do to represent us and to share our story and to convey what is going on in industry and to try and overcome some of those slightly misguided beliefs? So what can we be doing better, and what is your challenge to us, apart from just telling our story? How can we support you?
Such a good question. And I guess there's never a silver bullet to tricky problems, is there? There's a range of issues. I mean, one of the greatest things that happened in Australia, dare I say, is COVID. Because two things happened. One is people rushed into the supermarkets and wherever else they bought food, and they took food home and they started cooking at home with their families. How terrific. It's changed people's lives. And the second is that people got in their cars and they drove west and they drove north, and people have said things to me like, wow, how long has this been going on? It's great out here. But I think that's incredibly powerful, and I don't know that we have really understood the impact of having so many Brisbane and Sydney and Melbourne, city people drive out and see how amazing regional towns are, how innovative the businesses are. A place like Tambo has got a great board as you drive into town telling about what they do. So I think that has been incredibly powerful, and of course it's been happening all over the world. So I do think this sense of connection to where our food comes from and where we are from is happening in a way that we don't understand fully yet what the impact of that will be. The second is that some of the things that impact agriculture the most on how we can be a part of, be in front of and benefit from these environmental and emissions discussions is change of regulation and legislation. So it's changing the Clean Energy Fund and the Emissions Reduction Fund to allow for recognition of greater productivity in beef cattle through nutrition and pasture production, all of those things. How do we start measuring loads and then being successful with changes? At the moment, those regulatory parts are either not in place or they're very difficult to work your way through. So I look forward to a change with ministers and their advisors and their departments, that they start to get excited about how Australia is going to do better than we're perhaps expecting because of the work that's been done regionally, that's been done in industry, the innovation and technology that's been utilised. How do we measure things better so that we can get on the scoreboard?
Cathy Schnitzling, ABC Landline. Very good to hear you speak today, Senator. Just going to give a little plug here that Landline will be doing a whole program on carbon emissions and COP26 coming up on the 7th of November, if the border's open. So we can get our reporters out to do that. I was very interested in what you had to say about you don't think that agriculture needs to be carved out of any decision about emissions reductions targets. And the Deputy Prime Minister and Nationalist leader, Barnaby Joyce, has said that he doesn't want regional Australia to suffer as a result of any emissions target. What is the best that you can hope for out of the meeting that's coming up on Sunday that's going to protect regional Australia and agriculture?
So I would preface my comments now by I speak as a member of the National Party room, not the National Party. And I think that all the commentary that's happened to date has been really helpful in starting for people to understand what members of the National Party room think and believe and what the discussion might be. And I think Barnaby, as the leader, has also done a terrific job about saying that this will be a discussion, and it will be an ongoing discussion. There will not be a light bulb moment on Sunday that's the end point. And we will, as representatives from all over Australia, come with visions and ideas and stories of what we're hearing from our patches and our industries. So the best thing that I could hope for is exactly what I've been talking about, is how do we better measure, how do we as government departments and ministers and agencies in this country better acknowledge and measure the work that happens in agricultural Australia and regional Australia. I could stand here for hours, literally, and tell you extraordinary innovation in all sorts of parts of the sector, in pork, in beef, in chicken, in trains. I've become quite the gunzel since taking on this role. There is, in sugarcane, in all parts of the sector, and in mining. And the best thing I could hope for is that we allow recognition of all of that work, measurement of all that work, and that we calm down. This is not hard. We've got this. We always have. We have dealt with changing climate in this nation forever. If you want to talk to anybody about how you deal with change, talk to a regional Australian. They'll tell you how. So that is what would be my takeaway. And the second part is, and I touched on this, I think the bit that does worry me about is this very fast transition around energy supply. So in my part of the world, in North Queensland, we have seen alternate renewable energy sources set up, never plugged into the grid. Very expensive way to generate electricity. So how do we do this in a way that Queenslanders in particular, but Australians, don't end up paying a price for electricity that damages the quality of life when our emissions target isn't for some time. We do not have to get all of this right tomorrow. We have the technology, we have the brains to manage this, but we also I would really be very unhappy if we made decisions that disadvantaged Australia based on a European model or an American model or somebody else's model, because we have to take control of our own destiny, do what's best for our nation, and definitely not in any way damage the lives and the lifestyles of Queensland families and regional families, because we already have a much higher cost of living. It's double the cost to build a house in Winton than it is in Brisbane. It is 3 times the amount to pay for business electricity in Mount Isa as it is in Brisbane. It is 3 times the amount to get insurance in Townsville as it is in Brisbane. So I would just caution that when we make decisions for regional Australia, we truly understand what the costs and the implications are before we start making decisions without understanding a clear and measurable roadmap. That's something that we can all understand and then make a decision about getting behind.
Hi Susan, James Nason from Beef Central. Thanks very much for your presentation today. I know the inquiry is still obviously a work in progress. The meat industry has made it really clear that it wants to see a regulatory response to this issue. Tell me what what's the appetite amongst your colleagues in Canberra, Susan, for a regulatory response to this?
It's a great question, James. I think people have been really interested to see how the evidence plays out. And to date, I think that most of it could be fixed with the Fozan's amendment to the code. I think you've got to be very careful about legislating for things, because the more regulation, the more legislation you have, the harder it is to do business, to operate. You just add costs. So we'll certainly see. That's why I mentioned that the last part of the inquiry will be to see what's happening in other jurisdictions. Italy has legislation around the use of leather. I think I mentioned that. The US, a number of the states have tried to regulate specifically for this. So we'll be really keen to see what's happening in the rest of the world, what could be a practical and useful outcome for Australia. I was being disappointed that the supermarkets have not come to give evidence on, how the product development is going and how what their views are on shelf placement, markdowns, margins, all interesting things to retailers.
Senator Adam Armstrong, cattle producer. My question carries on from the landline question, but a lot of the discussion around carbon emissions and so forth is about reductions. But to me, there seems to be immense potential as a producer and a landowner around commercial opportunities if the carbon sink that we own and sit upon is recognised. At the moment, all the discussion is around the emissions of our cattle, but no one's actually taking into account the sink and the carbon we're sequestering. Do you see any potential for that to form a commercial opportunity for us going forward?
Yes, absolutely, and you're so right. I mean, we always look at the dark and not the light. There is great work done on carbon sequestering, soil sequestering, on measuring and improving that. I think we see that a lot more in the grains industry. The cotton guys, they all think a lot more about measuring their soils, and trees, of course, and rangelands is the other one. So there's a terrific paper that was that I've just sent off to the Department of Agriculture and the Department of Industry for their comment on this range of work that's happened on how we measure the sink, and that's not just on land, it's in the sea as well, and how Australia better recognises the broad range of opportunities that we have and how that benefits us, rather than just stopping doing something. I mean, it's like any anything in life, isn't it? You've got a couple of options. What do you start doing? What do you stop doing? I think there's a lot of things that we can be doing and recognising better, and that's why I keep talking about the formulas and the science and the recognition. One more question over here. Yes.
Thank you. Got to stand up again there. I'm Charlie Walker, I'm CEO of Energy Storage. Sam, so thank you very much for your presentation today. I'd just like to let everyone know that if you use our standalone power systems, it's cheaper than buying energy from Earth. Thank you very much.
Excellent. I'm disappointed. I thought we were going to have a further energy discussion, but we'll have that later.
Probably two more. There's one here and one over there.
Murray Delmita, Susan, a political question which I may apologise before I start. It's not on the big story. Susan, the quotas dates you spoke about correctly a long way ahead. What's not a long way ahead is the next election. I work with a lot of millennials. I know a lot of millennials. They live in the now. Climate change is in the now. There's a very important cabinet meeting on Sunday. Those millennials all have a vote and they're very conscious of their future. Your comment?
Oh, well, millennials are no different to everybody else. They want to be informed. If they're not informed and they don't feel that they feel they only have one choice to make, then that's our failure for continuing to talk about the message. And this is both us regionally as well as industry. I mean, being a retailer before doing this job has been a terrific apprenticeship, because people will only come to you, people will only spend their money with you if you're doing a good job. And part of that is telling them. And it's exactly the same. The policies that we come up with as a government, we need to clearly explain to people why we believe they're better. John Howard used to talk about politics being the contest of ideas. And that's exactly what this is. So what I would put to you is that what the coalition is going to go to the election with is a plan that is measurable and trackable, and you'll be able to make a decision on whether or not you're prepared to pay the price that plan would have. And then it'll be up to the other side to do the same thing. And then people make a decision. Am I prepared to pay the price for that plan? Is this the plan that I want? It's that contest of ideas. The millennials, though, and this is the bit that I struggle with, because we have moved from an environment where people would see the news. They'd see it on the newspaper while they picked up their fish and chips. They would see a little bit on the telly at night, listen to it on the car. But now we have less and less journalists. And the journalists are being rewarded on whether or not their story is sexy enough to be clicked on. So a lot of the stories that we're talking about and we would like to see aren't really click-worthy for people who are, young people, I would suggest. So that is a real challenge for us. We did an inquiry into the power and the situation for Google and Facebook and those other big media providers. And I think we have a real challenge about who owns the news, who owns the distribution, and that's something that concerns me very much. I mean, Facebook has changed its algorithms recently so that if you want to see the incredibly interesting and exciting things that I have done this week, you'll have to go and search for it. It will no longer pop up as part of your feed because you've liked my page and so forth. So, how do I get my message to those young people? How do you as an industry get your message to those people, those young people? And it is a challenge. I don't have all the answers, but I can tell you that going to the election, you will see a clear roadmap, a measurable roadmap that you can make a decision about. Is that the right way forward for Australia? Do I want to get behind that? And I hope you will.
Hi, Madison Campbell here from Brookwood Global Foods. You've spoken a lot today about misleading the consumer and the part that marketing plays in that. I just want, as a company that's generally invested in sustainability and is on track for carbon neutrality by 2022, I wanted to ask you whether the inquiry would cover misleading claims on sustainability and plant-based products being more sustainable than meat-based products, and what your opinion is on that.
Thank you very much, and that is an excellent question, because that's at the heart of this, isn't it? Why would consumers, why would the CSIRO, why would other investors feel that it's so important for them to invest in this new food technology? And when they then market it, having done the investment, when they market it, what is their point of difference? And if their point of difference is going to be because we're better, because we're more sustainable, because we're greener and we're kinder to animals, well, they'd better have the facts to back it up, because that is our problem. That is our problem as regional Australians, because these things are not manufactured in regional Australia, they're manufactured in the cities. They are not supporting our regional communities, and they do need to have the data and the science behind it. So you make a good point. We have touched on that a little bit, but I look forward to hearing from food manufacturers and marketers to say, well, where is the science? Where is the evidence that says that you're better and that your production, your claims that you could be producing crops on all of these rangelands, how could that work? So I look forward to that, and I think that will be an interesting part of the discussion, and that may well become the regulatory solution that James asked about before. Is, you know, the truth in marketing and truth in advertising is something that perhaps we need to come back and have a closer look at. But congratulations on the work you're doing. Not with government forcing it, not with any international guidelines. You've done it because it's good for your business, it's good for your profitability, and congratulations.
Thank you so much, Susan, for a wonderful address, and I think we could have asked questions all afternoon. In a moment, our new Treasurer, John Burke, will join us for a formal vote of thanks to Senator McDonald this afternoon. If John, if you wanted to start making your way up here. But before I do it, just a couple of things. The first is to the energy gentleman. If you could leave your details with Rachel, we can send you a mid-tier sponsorship invoice. Because I reckon you got a few bucks out of that today. Nobody else got any ideas. But we'll talk to you. And the second is that I believe on John's table is Susan's father, Mr. Don McDonald, who is here today and who, of course, has made an amazing contribution to rural and regional Australia and the beef industries, both through his own business and through a number of roles that he has held. So it's great to have you here today too, Mr. McDonald.
Thank you. It's my pleasure today to provide a vote of thanks to Susan. So I've known Susan for a long time, let's say, in a professional capacity. And the one thing that stood out to me is her passion for not only the beef industry, but for regional Queensland in general, and in particular Northwest Queensland. So on this International Day of Rural Women, it was fantastic to have Susan be with us today to provide an update on the meat definitions inquiry. Just a couple of points that stood out to me, that food choice should be easy for the consumer. I didn't know that there was 270 plant-based meat products on the market. Consumers, they want clarity. As a banker, professional profitable businesses are sustainable businesses. Susan is not afraid to defend the agricultural and the meat industry. We should be proud of what we produce. And I guess as agricultural industry, there are plenty of fights ahead, and we need to stand up and be proud of the industry and what we produce. And I guess just one final point, I don't think I quite got this quote, but no good idea had come from sitting down over a salad, but maybe if that was accompanied by beef, pork or chicken, then there would be plenty of good ideas. So on behalf of the Rural Press Club, members and guests today, I want you to join with me in thanking Senator Susan McDonald for being with us today. Thank you.
Thank you, John, and thank you again, Susan. Look, just very quickly before we go, I do have a couple of dates for your diaries. As many of you will know, we have tried twice now to have Bryce Cam as our speaker at 2 ECAs, 2019 and of course 2020, and both times we have been thwarted and had to cancel those. So I'm very happy to announce today that we will have Bryce Cam, Director of Cam Agricultural Group and Chair of Beef Australia, joining us on National Ag Day, which is Friday the 19th of November, to deliver his address. Then we're having that at the Convention Centre, and those tickets will be available for sale, or for purchase I should say, this afternoon. We'll be sending that email out. So book that one in for National Ag Day. We'd love to see you there, and we do expect that one to sell out quite quickly. I know this one sold out extremely fast and there were some disappointed people. So jump online when that comes out this afternoon if you can. The second date for your diary is our annual Christmas function and the presentation of our very own Queensland Rural Media Awards. Now, these are booked for Wednesday, the 8th of December. Tickets aren't on sale yet, but we'll let you know when they are. And entries, and there are a lot of journalists in the room today, entries for the Rural Media Awards are also open as of this afternoon. We've got plenty of categories for journalism, from print to radio, TV and digital, as well as photography. The sections are landscape, people and production. And then there are overall prizes as well. So we have cash prizes on offer. You have the chance to go on to consideration for national awards as well. Entries close on the 12th of November, so if you can get online and get those details today, we would love to see your entries. A few quick thank yous before we wrap up. I know we're a little bit over this afternoon. Firstly, to Rachel Harding at the SAS Group, who's been walking around with the microphone. This is Rachel's first event. Ashley from SAS, who many of you will know, has gone off on maternity leave. So Rachel, welcome. You've done a great job on your first event. It would have been a little overwhelming, I'm sure. So it's great to have you on board, and we're looking forward to working with you and the rest of the team at SAS as always. Thank you to Tattersalls Club, again as always, for being a pure delight to work with. Nothing is too difficult for these people, so thank you to Tats. A huge thank as always to our sponsors, McCullough Robertson Lawyers, Collier's Agribusiness and Sun Super. As I said, we can't be here without the support of our sponsors. And of course, thank you to you, our members, guests and friends. It's been great to see you. Hopefully we'll see you again next month at Ag Day. So we'll see you next time at the Rural Press Club. Thank you.